I think it's important to step back and remember that workplace violence, unfortunately, is rather common. In 2017, there were 450 murders in civilian workplaces, and in 2016, almost 400 itself. And in the military, we're not immune to what happens in society. And if you've looked back, almost a decade ago now, the Fort Hood shooting, where a dozen people were murdered, and then almost every year since then, we've had isolated but very sad incidents of workplace violence on military bases. And so we'll see what the investigations show with respect to especially the Pensacola shooting and what the motivation was of this Saudi national. But it's a tragedy wherever it happens. An old black lab named Guinness who lived 15 years, and he was... The general security of our military bases is overall outstanding. You have to understand that there are thousands and thousands that come on and off base every single day. Most people don't live on a base or a post. And we have civilians, tens of thousands of civilians, hundreds of thousands of civilians that come on and off posts and bases every day. Their cars aren't searched. They don't have time to do that. 99.99% of people who come on and off a base every single day and night are law-abiding, patriotic people. And so we've updated our many protocols for bases, but they're active workplaces. And so there'll be an after-action report. There'll be what's called a hot wash on this incident, these two incidents, to see what, if anything, they can do to tighten even further the protocols on base. But we've done a lot over the last 15, 20 years to make sure bases are safe and secure, but also reasonable egress and ingress into the bases. An old bear and on Memorial. We need to have foreign nationals who are partners of ours working with our military, because we work with foreign militaries all over the world. And so I'm not familiar with the exact protocol that they use to screen these particular pilots, but I've been stationed and deployed overseas myself, worked with the British and others. And these are our allies, and so we need to be working with them. If there's some slight modification or change to screening, fine. But this, was a murder. This was a murder in Pensacola. It was clearly a workplace violent, a disgruntled, deranged individual in Hawaii. And this happens in the civilian world as well. You can only take security measures so far. At a certain point, you have to just live in a free society and suffer the consequences of that. The security at our bases is very, very good. And remember that despite what some in the public who have very little understanding of what the military is about thinks, people aren't walking around on bases with guns. Bases are, believe it or not, gun-free zones except for military police and other authorized personnel. But we've had a number of security enhancements in bases and posts over the last decade and a half. It's outstanding for the most part. Are there some slip-ups along the way? I'm sure there are. And so the CEO of this base and the Department of the Navy, and then, of course, the FBI through their criminal investigation, will work together and come up with an after-action report to decide whether any mistakes were made, whether there were any protocols that were breached, or whether there are any additional security precautions that need to be put in place to prevent an act like this in the future. But I can tell you this, an act of violence will happen in the future on a military base, just like it will happen in the civilian workplace, because that happens. It's sad, but it's a reality. And so there's no amount of security you can put in place to prevent evil people from doing evil things. There's a very natural tendency to jump to the conclusion that because the shooter was a Saudi national, that this is an act of terrorism. And I think we should resist the impulse to jump to that conclusion and wait for facts to be developed by the FBI and the military and follow the facts wherever they lead. If it was a disgruntled, evil individual who was mad because he wasn't going to get his pilot wings, or he wasn't getting the qualification ratings that he wanted, or he had a beef with somebody, or there was a girlfriend involved who slighted him, and he did these horrible acts because of that, well, then that's that. If there is some connection to terrorism, well, then that's that. But let's not assume that because he was a Saudi national in their Air Force and he murdered our people, that he's a terrorist. He's a murderer. We know that. But that's all we know right now.